There is so much slow motion, so much slow-mo in this movie, which just extends its running time. And the slow-mo isn't just used for action scenes. It's used for people drinking water, planting seeds, or even walking from one building to the other, walking across the street in slow motion. It extends the running time significantly in a movie that already feels too long, despite also feeling like a ton of scenes are missing. And that is perhaps the most frustrating aspect of this movie. Now, my friends, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to Zack Snyder's latest film, chat. My review for Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon Part 1, and heavy emphasis on that chat, A Child of Fire. Now, for those who may not know the plot, the story, the history, the lore, the background of Zack Snyder's latest film, let me go ahead and set it up for you, chat. A lengthy time ago, in a universe far, far away, a young farm girl, realizes their destiny is to bring balance to a war-torn universe and a world being ripped apart by an evil empire. And she must put together a team of scruffy-looking smugglers and light sword-wielding warriors to save those she loves most. Sounds familiar? To start on a positive note, in regard to Zack Snyder, there are several films of his that I actually really enjoy, that I do think are quite good. His first movie, Dawn of the Dead, his remake of Dawn of the Dead from 2004, I think that is a very good zombie film. Probably one of the best horror films from the 2000s, in a decade where horror wasn't at its peak, wasn't doing particularly well. Now, I do think maybe that movie got a little wonky in the third act, but overall, I found it very, very entertaining. I think it has some great acting, it's got some great action, some great horror segments, some wonderful practical effects in there. There's a lot in that movie that Zack Snyder did right. I like 300. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but at the time I was like, wow, this is visually, it's stunning. It's something a little different that we weren't exactly used to during that time. And I was like, I like that movie. Although again, it's been a little while since I've seen the film. And honestly, I think his best movie is kind of the one that is most often overlooked, and that's his animated film, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. I guess it just didn't do very well commercially because he's never really returned to animation since then, but I wouldn't mind if he actually did that. So I've always liked to praise Owls of Ga'Hoole because I think it's often forgotten. Outside of those films, I really dislike the rest of his filmography. From Man of Steel to Batman v Superman, he's done, in my opinion, a lot of damage to the DC brand. Army of the Dead is an incoherent, poorly filmed, in focus, out of focus mess, and Sucker Punch is one of the worst, most disgusting, misogynistic theatrical films of the 21st century. Going into Rebel Moon, I can't say I was exactly excited, especially with this apparently being a rejected Star Wars pitch to Lucasfilm, long before it was actually acquired by Disney. Despite all that, I wanted to give this film a chance. I wanted to give it a fair shot. I want to be earnest and honest about my opinions on this film, and I have to say, this is one of the worst films of the year, and I think you can make an argument one of the worst movies of the decade, of the 2020s so far. I have no doubt that Zack Snyder is a fan of the original Star Wars trilogy, probably the prequels as well, and other sci-fi fantasy epics. Grew up watching that stuff. But he doesn't have a clue as to why those films are so beloved and cherished by so many people to this day. This movie has no substance to it in any capacity in terms of story, the characters, or even the world building, his favorite thing. It is pure slow-mo, desaturated spectacle with frequent scenes of gratuitous excretions of exposition and word vomit. The movie literally starts with Sir Anthony Hopkins name-dropping galactic, supposedly important characters and a PowerPoint slides worth of sci-fi fantasy mumbo-jumbo. And after that, it's just slow-mo scene after slow-mo scene with new characters you never learn anything about, with awful, unintentionally funny dialogue in between for over 2 hours. 2 hours and some change. Our main character, played by Sophia Boutella, I haven't seen her in a while, is Korra. Not the Avatar chat, just regular old Korra. But her, I don't know, she has another name in the movie. I could not for the life of you remember it. Miss Schmeckle. I think her name is Miss Schmeckeldorf. You know, I can understand why she changed the name. And it's like, I think I want to go with Korra instead of Miss Schmeckeldorf. No offense to any of the Schmeckeldorfs out there, but I don't know. It's not a name that inspires a lot of hope. Or a lot of dread in this case. So we're gonna stick with Korra. And you know, she to me is, you know, one of the worst main characters I have seen in a movie this year. Certainly when it comes to a genre film. And like just really any, I think, sci-fi fantasy film this decade and probably over the last 20 or so years. I mean, we literally start with her, farming and just huffing dirt, just getting off to smelling, snorting, just. That's literally her first scene, chat. Like she's plowing the fields of this not Tatooine world. And with a space horse that shit. There's also a lot of space horse shitting scenes. They're always in the background. I guess Zack Snyder found that very funny. It's like, let's let the space horse here, but it's shitting in the background as the characters are talking. Fantastic. That's great. But like her first scene literally is her just squatting the ground, taking a big old just handfuls of dirt, go like another character in the background, just kind of watching her going, is she just snorting dirt for some reason? It's a little weird introduction. I guess it's to show that she loves the land, she loves her new life, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I was kind of confused, though, because I wasn't sure if she was the main character at first. Because she disappears for, like, the next 30 minutes of the movie. And we focus on a whole bunch of other people on this, like, little village chat that they're just trying to enjoy themselves. They're just trying to, have a successful harvest. They're having a fertility festival. And, the Nordic Corey Stoll is just telling everybody, like, all right, after you get all your food, all your vegetables, all your produce, all right, now start stooping. We got to make some babies. They're having a good time. And then after that, she goes and hangs out with not Obi-Wan Kenobi for a while. And then we kind of don't cut to her for a bit. And we're just with other members of the village. And I'm going to tell you right now, listen, so I think for a lot of us, our first exposure to Sophia Boutella was in Matthew Vaughn's first Kingsman movie, The Secret Service, which I actually like that first Kingsman film. I don't know why. For whatever reason, Matthew Vaughn's like, this is going to be a thing. It's like, Matthew, it's not going to be a thing. You have to stop, okay? Like, I like the first Kingsman movie. I really have not liked the other films in this franchise. Stop trying to make it a thing. No one wants it anymore. However, that was her first introduction, and she was like this badass assassin working for Samuel Jackson. Kind of was a callback to the great James Bond henchman and henchwoman of the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, hell, into the 90s. And so I thought that was like, that was really cool. Again, we didn't really get to see much of her acting, but physically, she nailed it. And then, she started appearing in a lot of other stuff. She was in that Mummy movie. That didn't work. Again, not her fault. It's just, horribly written, horribly directed. She was in the other movie I actually liked her in. The only other movie that I can think of that I liked her in was, and again, not a very good movie, was the Star Trek Beyond film. It was the third of the J.J. Abrams produced Star Trek movies. I think Justin Lin directed it. She played, I think, a wholly original character in that movie, Jayla, this kind of like very white alien, and like that was like like her makeup, and she had like this these black lines around her face. And I actually really liked her in the film. She, matter of fact, is probably my favorite aspect of it, all the character stuff. She had like this great rapport of Captain Kirk with Chris Pine, and I was like, wow, this is really good. But I guess that movie didn't do well in the Star Trek franchise, at least in terms of its theatrical films, have kind of gone nowhere. But I was like, oh yeah, I liked her in there. It was too bad that didn't work out. So she's kind of had all these, like, this great introduction, and I think ever since then, these like false starts. But man, I'm gonna tell you, chat. She's forced to carry so much of this movie on her shoulders, and the direction and the writing and just the material. It's just not there for her. I mean, she's so dull and boring, and she's just responsible for so much of the films. Most of the films, gratuitous exposition. And I gotta tell you, she delivers one of the worst lines in a film this year. Like, she sits down with one of the other supporting characters. We're gonna get to the supporting cast in a bit, yeah. There's some stinkers in this cast. And she's just like, all right, backstory time. And she just goes through her entire backstory, regurgitating all of it. And then we then cut back, and there's just kind of like this awkward silence. And she literally says, I just wanted to tell you that so you know the kind of character I am. It's like, I know. Through conversations, that's usually we get a sense of who you are as a person. You don't need to tell me that. And I'm just like, oh my God. And it's done with this self-seriousness that makes this movie and so many of Zack Snyder's other films so unintentionally funny. It makes it so comedic. Just laugh out loud. You go, wait, what? And you start giggling to yourself. And I know, there's little bits and pieces of humor in this movie, and that's fine. But again, the funniest parts of the film are when it is at its most serious, which to me is a failure on the part of the director and certainly the writers. None of the supporting cast fares any better. They're all derivative, boring versions of fantastic, beloved sci-fi heroes and villains we've seen before for countless decades. Charlie Hunnam, who I'm not very fond as an actor. I really liked him in that one film when he I think it was with Tom Holland, when he's been like exploring the Amazon. That was actually cool. The Lost Civilization of Zen. I don't remember the title, but I was like, that's a good movie. And of course, he's probably known for his television work, of course. But Charlie Hunnam pretty much plays Han Solo, Chad. He's just more scummy, dirty, grill-wearing Han Solo, Irish Han Solo. And he's just like, I'm just a man of opportunity. I consider myself an entrepreneur. It's like, you probably shouldn't trust me, but maybe you should. Who knows? And that's his whole thing. That's like, and he literally, even his introduction is literally in Mos Eisley Cantina. A more rapey Mos Eisley Cantina, but Mos Eisley Cantina nonetheless. And he just kind of joins them for, no specific discernible reason, and then proceeds to not really speak throughout most of the movie until a very important scene towards the end. This is like a problem. This is a problem throughout the film. Jimon Hunsu's in it, and he plays like a former general, and he's just an angry, sleepy man. He just wants to be angry, and he wants to be sleepy. But Sophia Boutella's like, you gotta help us, the Rebel Moon. And he's like, okay. And he gets his ass up and proceeds to do absolutely nothing in the movie. He doesn't do anything in the movie, at all. It's like they go to him. He's sad and sleepy. He also seems to be very ashy. I think he's in need of some cocoa butter or something, Chad, or some lotion, because my God, he is not doing well. And then they get him, they recruit him, and then they're off to the next location. You have a Jedi character. You have a Jedi Sith character who uses lightsabers, but they don't call them lightsabers, but that's exactly what they are. And she fights a spider lady, and they're like, hey, you're pretty cool. Want to come with us? And she's like, okay. And she then proceeds to not talk at all. You also have a guy, this is actually early in the movie, you have a guy who's part Conan the Barbarian and part Beastmaster from that early 90s, possibly late 80s TV series, who had command over the animals. He doesn't do anything in the movie other than just ride a griffin in slow motion at one point. You've seen all the trailers, Chet, that griffin, the black griffin and the big swole guy. That's his scene. And then after that, he's just in the background. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't say anything. They do a weird lore drop with him at some point where he's like, oh, he's that? I was like, okay. I guess that's a spoiler, but sure. And also, I would say there's a little bit of Avatar There's a lot of Avatar in his section where, you know, he somehow has this connection with the flora and fauna and the animals of planets, and he speaks animal languages, I guess, and he's able to calm them down for domestication, Chad. He's like, that's what I do. And I'm like, okay, if you say so. Ray Fisher's in the movie too, and he's kind of struggling to speak coherent sentences, but he manages to get a few words out of his mouth hole. Got to give him that, Chad. Got to give him that. I know Ray Fisher's had a bit of a rough time. You know, first coming out on the scene with something like Justice League in the mainstream, that did not work for him. That was a saga and a half. But now he's here, and again, Zack Snyder doesn't really do anything with him other than, well, have him, I guess, kind of look cool. His name is, I think, like Blood Axe or something, like Darian Blood Axe, and he's got a sister, and they're part of the rebellion of the moons or whatever. And they gotta fight, and he's like, I guess I'll join you. And he gets a slow-mo action scene too. The worst of the supporting cast is the character of Gunner, played by, I believe, Mikael Huisman. If that's how you say his name. If not, my apologies. Mikael Huisman. He's pretty much Uncle Owen from A New Hope if Uncle Owen was consistently incompetent and constantly endangering himself and everyone else around him. He's in love with Miss Cora Schmeckledorf in the movie, and I'm guessing that's like the only reason as to why he's allowed to stick around. Like, everyone in the village hates this guy because he constantly makes bad decisions. He often says stupid things. Even people say, like, don't talk, Gunner. Don't speak. He's like, I got this, guys. I'm going to start talking. And as soon as he starts talking, that's when all the trouble happens. Like, the whole plot of this movie, the reason why, Sophia Boutella is recruiting all these characters across this universe is because of this guy and his big, dumb mouth. He's the reason why the village is being attacked by the bad guys, Chet. And the villains of the movie, the Mother World, as they call themselves, they're the Empire from Star Wars. They're the Empire from Star Wars with a Warhammer 40K aesthetic. You know, they introduce like a dozen bad guys via exposition and slow-mo flashbacks or flashbacks and Anthony Hopkins lore drops. But the main villain of the movie is Ed Skrein as Admiral Noble, but he's anything but noble, chap. And he's just there to twirl his non-existent mustache, do space drugs, and get fucked up the ass by a hentai monster. And you think I'm joking, but I'm not. That last part is true. I was like, are we doing this? There's hentai in this unit. Okay, we got hentai. All right, fair. The Motherworld soldiers and other villains we come across are divided into two specific groups. Group number one, want to kill everyone and anything in their eye line. It's like they see something that's alive, we got to kill it. That over there is alive, got to kill it. Group two wants to rape everyone. There is no in between. You're either a genocidal maniac or a serial rapist. Also, Zack Snyder, I noticed this. Zack Snyder makes like every single gay character, they're secondary, tertiary characters in this movie, either a rapist or a whore. I think he was probably watching David Lynch's Dune a few too many times back in the 80s. I kind of do wonder, if Zack Snyder has like a fixation on rape. He seems to often reference it when talking about his version of Batman, or including in his supposed female empowerment movies like Sucker Punch. Not saying he does have a fixation, but it has popped up in several strange places, and it's just really, really odd and often ill-fitting. I mean, if you want Star Wars with slow-mo and rape, Rebel Moon's the movie for you. As much as I've been complaining about the characters and the world building, it's the story that's truly awful in this movie. While this film steals quite poorly, I might add, from numerous sci-fi fantasy films and other genre films, It mostly steals from Seven Samurai and The Magnificent Seven. Seven Samurai inspired so many films. I mean, it's the film that inspired The Magnificent Seven. It's pretty much the American Western version of the Seven Samurai. You know, while those movies have a beginning, a middle, and an end, along with constant character interactions between the main and supporting characters and cast, this film has none of that in any capacity. We just go from generic sci-fi world to the next. Meet a random character, watch them do a slow-mo action scene, and they just join Korra's group and then repeat. Rinse and repeat, chat. There are no interactions at all between the group. No one talks to each other outside of Korra and Gunner. They're the only two that have consistent conversations in the movie, which often involves heavy exposition. Like, you'll literally have, we'll go to a random world, like you'll have a name, you know, Cyrax of the second pillar farm town, and then they land. They look over and they're like, that guy looks kind of cool. That girl looks kind of cool. They'll follow behind them. They'll then watch them do a slow-mo scene, usually battling a giant spider lady or you know, taming a wild space griffin, and they'll just kind of be like this in the background, like, oh, yeah, oh, should we be involved? No, okay, they got it, okay. Hey, wow, that was cool. You want to join us? I guess so. I got nothing else to do. That's what this movie is. There is so much slow motion, so much slow-mo in this movie, which just extends its running time. And the slow-mo isn't just used for action scenes. It's used for people drinking water, planting seeds, or even walking from one building to the other, walking across the street in slow motion. It extends the running time significantly in a movie that already feels too long, despite also feeling like a ton of scenes are missing. And that is perhaps the most frustrating aspect of this movie, because it feels like Zack Snyder and Netflix put out such a just incoherent, sloppy mess of a film to galvanize his fan base, to demand a new Snyder cut that's already coming in a few months. It's a faux controversy that I believe is meant to recreate the Justice League Snyder cut phenomenon from years ago, to keep the film in the pop culture zeitgeist. And if that's the case, then that makes this already awful film even worse. Look, if you like this movie, that's fine. But I have to be honest with all of you. This is a genre-damaging movie that features, I think, some of the worst aspects of poor storytelling, characterization, world building, and spectacle one could feature in a genre film. It indulges in the worst aspects of Zack Snyder as a filmmaker and possibly exposes himself and Netflix in manipulating, in bastardizing the art form to generate controversy for the sake of controversy. And that in itself is why this movie is simply terrible in my eyes. But that's just my thoughts. That's just my opinion on this film. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are putting out their reviews right now. I'm sure. And hey, this is just another review. Another review. I'm actually very curious to hear what people think about this film. What about you guys? Did you actually like the movie? Did you love the movie? Were you more mixed on it? Were you more like me, where you thought it was bad? You thought it was terrible for the variety of reasons I just told you? Please go ahead and let me know.
5 minutes later.
Man, I'm telling you, Chad, I'm just realizing there's like weird characters introduced in this film where I was like, who the fuck is this? There's a Jesus in the movie. There's like a Jesus girl who is able to heal, to be able to bring people back from the dead. I was like, who the fuck are you? She's just at one point where Sophia Boutella's like, hey, let me tell you about a little girl Jesus I met. I'm like, okay. And she talks about this little girl who like heals animals and brings them back from death. And I was like, are we going to recruit her? I think maybe that would be pretty good. You know, in case any of your characters die, it's like, hey, she'll be the MVP of the team. She's your healer. But we never go back to her. I was like, who was that little girl? I don't know. But yeah, chap, that's my thoughts on Rebel Moon, part 1. Oh, I forgot. I'm going to add this. who the fuck is the child of fire? Who is that? They don't say who the child of fire is in the movie. It's like Sophia Boutella describes herself, I am a child of war. Other people call her a child of war in the movie. And I'm thinking like, well, that probably should be the title. Like, who's the child of fire? I don't know. Whose children are being set on fire? It wasn't the life giver girl, but they call her the life giver, like the little Jesus girl. They call her, they say like, she was a life giver. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not called a child of life. It's so I don't know. Flame on, on. This is for you, Melinda. This is for you. So I'm very confused by that. The subtitle, I was thinking like, all right, when we're going to get to the subtitle. And I was like, they don't. I still don't know. That's the big mystery. Maybe they'll explain it in part 2.